The crypto world is watching closely as XRP appears poised to cross a major milestone: the imminent launch of a spot XRP exchange-traded fund, or ETF, in the US, a move that could open the institutional floodgates and reshape how the token is traded and held. In this breakdown, I'm going to walk through how we arrived here, what the current developments are, how markets are reacting in real time, and what the risks and possibilities are going forward, all with a serious analytical lens. Setting the stage, XRP's journey to an ETF. To understand the significance of a spot XRP ETF, we've got to rewind a bit, because this isn't just another token launch. XRP, created by Ripple Labs, has had a long circuitous path, from promising cross-border payments infrastructure to regulatory battlefront, and now onto the cusp of regulated institutional investment. An ETF, exchange-traded fund, is a regulated vehicle that trades on exchanges and gives exposure to an underlying asset, in this case, XRP. Historically, institutional investors were prevented or hesitant to take direct, large-scale exposure in many crypto tokens because of custody, regulation, and liquidity concerns. When you layer XRP's past, regulatory ambiguity, classification questions in the US, and the fact that it's peripheral to Bitcoin and Ether in the altcoin category, the prospect of a normalized, spot-backed, regulated ETF is substantial. What the current news says: here's the latest timeline and key facts. Canary Capital has filed a Form 8A with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission for its spot XRP ETF, a structure that would be fully backed by XRP held in custody. According to reports, the ETF could go live as early as this Thursday, pending certification by the Nasdaq stock market. Meanwhile, multiple issuers, including Bitwise Asset Management, 21Shares, CoinShares, and others, have spot XRP ETF filings listed on the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, or DTCC, infrastructure, indicating readiness for launch. At the same time, analysts and reports are flagging key risk factors: profit-taking by long-term holders ahead of the launch, heavy buy-the-rumor positioning, and the potential for a sell-the-news reaction. On the price front, XRP surged 12% amid the ETF chatter. Why this matters: big picture. When we step back from the immediate hype, a few fundamental shifts are in view. 1. Institutional access. A spot XRP ETF gives registered investment advisors, pension funds, and traditional asset managers a regulated way to get exposure to XRP without holding it directly on crypto exchanges. The filings point to direct exposure, full backing of XRP in custody. 2. Liquidity plus price discovery. More institutional participation typically means deeper liquidity, tighter spreads, and potentially more stable pricing behavior, at least relative to thin altcoin environments. One piece says the ETF could expand XRP's liquidity base and trigger inflows from registered investment advisors who have avoided direct crypto exposure. 3. Broader market implication. If XRP, often considered a smaller major token compared to Bitcoin or Ether, can secure a spot ETF, it opens the door for other altcoins to follow. That, in turn, could shift how we think about the crypto market in regulated finance. Real-time reactions, market behavior, and sentiment. Here's how markets are behaving now, and what that tells us. Despite the bullish ETF momentum, XRP pulled back 3% in one day, even though the weekly gain was meaningful.
On-chain data shows large holders, so-called
XRP
whales,
price is falling over 3% to $2.45.
This is a
the drop comes right after the Canary XRP ETF launch.
Analysts
Readiness
are pointing to the $2.50 to $2.53 zone as short-term support. If that breaks, risk of further correction exists. The buy-the-rumor, sell-the-news phenomenon appears alive. High anticipation, heavy positioning, some profit-taking ahead of the main event. That suggests the immediate move may be more about positioning than fundamentals yet. Transition from hype to execution. We're now entering that critical phase, the transition from hype to actual launch. That's a different ballgame. The news flow shifts from will they to did they and how does it trade? Because once the ETF is live, the metrics and focus change. Actual inflows into the ETF, how much money goes in. Premium/discount to NAV, how the ETF trades relative to the underlying asset. Impact on XRP's supply and liquidity dynamics, how much XRP is locked in the trust or custody versus freely tradable. Market reaction, does price go up, stay flat, or correct? Regulatory reaction, does the SEC or other regulators intervene post-launch, or is everything smooth? Risks and caveats. This moment is big, but it's also fraught with caveats. Here are key risks. Regulatory risk. The regulatory backdrop remains unstable for crypto. Even though the filings are advanced, a shift in SEC policy or government reopening or reevaluation could change timelines or conditions. Sell the news risk. With so much expectation baked in, there's a risk that once the ETF launches, the market tells traders, okay, done that, now what? And price might pause or even pull back. The profit-taking we're already seeing suggests this risk is non-trivial. Execution risk. Launching an ETF is one thing, getting meaningful, sustained inflows is another. If institutional interest is below expectations, the hype may fade quickly. Analysts are watching first week and month numbers closely. Token-specific risks. XRP has its own history, community, regulatory legacy, including the legal battle Ripple faced. Some investors may treat exposure to XRP differently than Bitcoin or Ether. That may limit how large the institutional wave becomes. What to watch closely, key metrics and dates. For the next few days and weeks, keep an eye on these. Launch date confirmation, when the ETF starts trading, which ticker, on which exchange, likely NASDAQ, under what structure. Initial flows, how much AUM gets committed early. Trading behavior, premiums, discounts, volume, correlation with XRP spot markets. XRP spot price reaction, does price go up, stay flat, or pull back post-launch?
Whale behavior. Are major holders accumulating, holding, or distributing during or after launch? Regulatory messaging. Does the SEC or other regulatory body provide comments or guidance post-launch? Broader altcoin impact. Does this spark interest in other altcoins getting ETF structures? Implications for on-the-ground investors and strategies. For our Alt Club community, what does this mean? Here's how you might interpret and act. If you believe in RXP's long-term utility, payments, settlements, global transfers, and the institutional upside from ETF access, then this launch could be a catalyst for long-term positioning. On the flip side, if you're more technically oriented or risk-sensitive, you may view the current phase as event risk, high upside but high volatility potential, and you might wait for the dust to settle post-launch before committing a larger position. Diversification matters. Even if RXP participates in the institutional wave, not all altcoins will. Investor attention is finite and concentrated. Risk management, with the possibility of a pullback or a sell the news moment, setting stop losses or reducing exposure size could make sense. Information flow will be key. Keep track of actual ETF inflows and structures rather than just filings and hype. The marketplace will reward clarified fundamentals, not speculation alone. What could happen next? Scenarios. Let's map out a few plausible scenarios for the next 3 to 6 months. Bull scenario. The spot RXP ETF launches smoothly, early inflows are strong, institutional interest shows up, and liquidity in RXP rises. Price breaks above key resistance, say $2.88, as some analysts suggest, and moves toward higher targets. Some speculative analyses even cite $4 plus. As a knock-on effect, other altcoin ETFs start getting momentum, broadening crypto capital beyond Bitcoin and Ether. Base scenario. The ETF launches, but inflows are moderate. Price action is steady but not explosive. RXP performs roughly in line with expectations or slightly above. Some profit-taking occurs, but fundamentals hold. Other altcoin ETFs continue to emerge, but investor caution remains high. Bear scenario. The ETF launch is delayed, or inflows disappoint. The event risk becomes real. Traders who anticipated the launch unwind positions, RXP price corrects, and sentiment becomes more cautious. A wait for next catalyst mindset takes hold. Institutional appetite shifts back to safer bets, Bitcoin or Ether, and altcoins get deprioritized. My analytical take. From my perspective, the launch of a spot XRP ETF is a very significant development, arguably one of the most important events in the altcoin space this year. But the keyword is development. The real question is what happens after the launch. I lean toward a pragmatic view. Yes, this is bullish for XRP over the medium term, but I don't expect an immediate exponential move unless several pieces align. Strong inflows, retail momentum, limited selling pressure, favorable regulatory backdrop. The fact that we're already seeing profit-taking and caution from whales tells me the market is aware of the risk that the event is baked in. If I were placing odds, I'd say moderate upside possible if things go well, e.g., double-digit percentage move over a few months, but a sharp correction is almost as likely if expectations aren't met. For anyone in our alts club, being positioned but cautious makes sense. You want exposure, but you also want buffer for volatility. If you found this breakdown useful, hit that subscribe button on Alts Club right now so you'll catch our next deep dive, because with developments like a spot XRP ETF, things move fast and you'll want to stay ahead. We'll keep tracking key metrics, launch flow numbers, whale behavior, and regulatory signals. I'll be back with a follow-up once the ETF starts trading, with live reaction commentary and what it means next. Thanks for watching, keep your seatbelts fastened, the next phase of altcoin evolution may be here. See you soon.